December 26th is today, and as a kid, this is one of the saddest days of the year, right? Like Christmas was over, the decorations were coming down, the presents were unwrapped, there was nothing really to look forward to, the anticipation was over. Maybe some of you are feeling that now, you're like, oh, Christmas is over, like what's there to look forward to? But also December 26th is the day we kind of shift our attention away from Christmas and the birth of Jesus into a new year. When we think about our plans for New Year's Eve, we think about New Year's Day, we think about Alabama going to the national championship, right? Like we always shift our attention to the new year. 2022 is a week away. Isn't that crazy to believe 2022 is already just a week away? And at the beginning of every year, a lot of us start to think about resolutions, maybe things we want to do differently. Does anybody in here make resolutions? I don't know if anybody really makes resolutions anymore. I think the trendy thing now is to pick a word and you use that word as your word and your theme of the year. Have you ever heard of that? So maybe somebody will say, my word of the year is joy. And so all throughout the year, they want to be more joyful and focus more on joy. Maybe it's consistency. And so they say, well, I want to be more consistent in every area of my life. And so for 2022, I'm going to be more consistent. Well, either way, whether you make resolutions or whether you pick a word or maybe you're just indifferent, we do it because we want a better life. We see things that need to be changed in our life, some things maybe we need to do differently, so we make a commitment to change it. We make a commitment to fix it. We resolve to do things differently. We resolve to look for more fulfillment in our life. We think, this is what I need, this is who I need, this is what I need to do to have a fulfilled life. And one of the places you see this is in the fascinating story we'll look at this morning. The account of Jacob and his search for one true love with Rachel and Leah. And you may think, well, John, that's a strange story to share on the weekend of Christmas. But I think you'll agree at the end of this, that this is the perfect passage to share on this Christmas weekend. Many of you may have come here this morning and you're thinking, well, it's the day after Christmas. The senior pastor is gone. Brother Nathan's not here. The youth pastor is preaching. So let's just kind of get an easy sermon and get out of here early and go to lunch. Maybe it's the mindset of, hey, we're going to get through the Sunday after Christmas. We'll start the major things, the real things in 2022 when everything's back into the routine. So we kind of have this coast it through Sunday mentality. But I want you to know for me and hopefully for you guys that that's not the plan this morning. I believe that God has brought us here. I believe he has a word for us here, and he wants to speak to us this morning. And he wants to do some incredible things in and through our lives this morning. So I want to share that with you today. I've read a lot of this content in this message a couple years ago, but I've been reminded and been reminding myself of much of this the past couple months. And so we're going to look at the story of Jacob and Leah and Rachel in Genesis 29. And so if you have your Bibles, you can turn there. If you don't have your Bibles, they're going to be on the screen behind me. And this is what it says starting in verse 15. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. Laban said, it's better that I give her to you than what I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So let's remember the backstory. We're kind of entering into the story in the middle of a lot of action. So let's remember what's going here, the context of what's going here. Here we're introduced to a guy named Jacob. And if you remember, Jacob had a twin brother. What is Jacob's twin brother's name? Y'all remember? Esau, right? And so their parents were people named Isaac and Rebekah. And so Isaac was the promised child, right? He was the son of Abraham who received the covenant of God. And so here we are, the third generation away from Abraham. And we're introduced to these twin boys, Jacob and Esau. And now there was a problem in this family because Isaac favored Esau and Rebekah favored Jacob. So obviously this caused some family issues, some family problems. And finally the time came, if you remember, for the elderly Isaac to give the blessing to the firstborn, which was supposed to be Esau. But Jacob dressed up as Esau. he went in and he stole the blessing from his brother. We remember reading when Esau found out about it. Was he okay with this? Was he happy? He's like, oh yeah, he deserved it. Not at all, right? He was angry, rightfully so, and he sought to kill his brother. Like, he was so mad he wanted just to end his life. And so Jacob had to flee. He had to flee into the wilderness. And this is where we kind of pick up in the story. For Jacob, everything seemed like it was ruined. For Jacob, it seemed like his life was over. Not only did he no longer have a family to be head of, he no longer had a family or an inheritance at all. And so he flees for his life. So Jacob escapes to his mother's family, and they take him in as kind of a charity case. And we see Laban, his uncle, allows him to be a shepherd. And so in verse 15, we pick up that Laban realized that Jacob was good at being a shepherd. He was good at being a manager and a leader. And so he sought to pay money to Jacob to fulfill this role, to be in charge of the flocks. And this is how we get to the question in verse 15, hey, how much can I pay you to be in charge? Jacob, what is it going to take? I see your ability. I see your need. Like, let's work out a deal. And what's Jacob's answer? Jacob's answer is basically one word: Rachel. He wanted Rachel as his bride. And he was willing to work 7 years for Rachel. And so what do we know about Rachel? Well, those verses tells us some things about Rachel. The text right out says that Rachel was lovely in form and appearance. Rachel was beautiful. The Hebrew word translated form here is very literal. It means exactly what you think, right? It's talking about her figure. Rachel had a great figure. She had a beautiful face. She was absolutely gorgeous. And as we read these verses, there are all sorts of signals in them about how over the top, intensely lovesick, head over heels, Jacob is for Rachel. He has this huge crush on her. There's that sappy but telling statement where the verse says Jacob served Rachel for 7 years, and they seemed to him but a few days, right? It was 7 long years, but because he was so in love, it just felt like in a few days. The Bible is showing us here a man driven by and overwhelmed with emotional and sexual longing for one woman. So the question is what's going on here? Well, Jacob's life was empty. He never had his father's love. Now he didn't even have his mother's love, and he certainly had no sense of God's love. He had lost everything at this point in his life. He had no family. He had no inheritance. He had no future, nothing. He's running away from everything he once knew. And as he's doing that, he sees Rachel, the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, the most beautiful woman for miles around. And he said to himself, if I had her, finally something would be right in my lousy life. He says, if I had her, life would have meaning. If I had her, everything that's gone wrong will be fixed. If he found his one true love, his life would finally be okay. All of the longings of his heart for significance, for security, for meaning were all fixed on Rachel. She was his whole hope for his future. If he was going to have any meaning, any purpose, it was with Rachel. This brings me to my first point that I want us to see this morning is that we all desire for our empty hearts to be filled. Every single one of us in this room, every single one of us in this world has a longing in our hearts for satisfaction, for fulfillment. We all have this emptiness in our heart that we hope to fulfill with things of this world. There is a human longing to fill the emptiness of our hearts, and this is what Jacob was doing. He was trying to fill his emptiness with love, with a girl, with romance. And Jacob was somewhat unusual for his time because in that time, people generally didn't marry for love. They married for status. But nevertheless, he's not rare today. One of the main ways today's culture has searched for meaning is through romance and through sex. Our secular culture has loaded its desire into purpose, into love. The love partner becomes one way to which fulfill somebody's life. We want to be justified. We want our creation not to be wasted. And this is exactly what Jacob is doing. And this is what people are doing all over the place today. And this is what our culture is begging us to do. to load all of our deepest needs of our hearts for significance and security into romance, into love, into finding that one true love. That will fix our lousy lives. And so you've seen it, like we turn on culture, we turn on movies, and we hear things like, you complete me, right? As if this person is a missing puzzle piece in our life, and once we have them in our life, then our puzzle in our life will be complete. We see that almost every movie, almost every TV show, like the main character or some fringe character is looking for someone or looking for love, or they are in love. I see it so often too in my personal life. Like this past summer, we went to Mission Fuge, and it was one of the best weeks, right? And all the students in here are like, yeah, Mission Fuge was so good. And during that week, we had a time where the youth pastors got together, and we kind of had like a round table one morning while everyone was in Bible study. And there was a pastor that came to this meeting, and we were talking, and he says, hey, y'all can pray for my church because we're looking for a youth pastor. And so we were asking him, like, what kind of guy are you looking for? What does the church want? And he was listing all these characteristics and attributes. And one of the first things he said was, we want our youth pastor to be married. And usually I'm like, okay, like, whatever. Like, I don't say anything. I'm not a confrontational guy. But for some reason, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I said, there are great youth pastors who aren't married, right? But so often people talk in a way that single people are not really living because they are not married. In fact, that's why our world is searching for love and romance so often. Did you know that dating apps in 2021 have made over $3 billion so far? $3 billion. Why? Why is there so much money in that? Because people can't imagine living without romance, without love. So they search for fulfillment in that. But that is not the only thing we search for fulfillment in. People try to fill their longing with more things than just a relationship. Think about some of the resolutions you've made in the past, or some of the resolutions you're going to make this year. Maybe that's where you're searching for your significance, for your satisfaction. So often, many of us are empty that we look for fulfillment in other ways. And so we run to money and careers, maybe to fitness and working out. Maybe we run to friends and friendships, or to lust, or to sports, or to a number of other things. We think, if I only had blank, then my life would have meaning. If I only had more money, then my life would have meaning. If I only had more friends, then my life would have meaning. If I only lost a few pounds, then my life would have meaning. If I only had a championship, then my life would have meaning. If I only had a better job, then my life would have meaning. And so we become obsessed with pursuing that one thing. My question for you this morning is, what would you fill your blank in with? If I only had blank, then my life would have meaning. Where are you searching for your fulfillment in? Let's pick up in the story. We'll pick up in verse 22, and this is what happens. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went in to her. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this that you've done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, for now my husband will love me. She conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I hated, he has given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore his name was called Levi. What are these verses showing us? What's it telling us? It's showing us that disillusionment and devastation almost always accompanies a search for fulfillment. What does that mean, John? Like, what are you trying to say? This is what I'm trying to say. The things of this world will always leave you disappointed. The things of this world will always leave us disappointed. So these verses begin with Laban's scheme, his uncle, right? Laban knew that Jacob offered to serve Rachel for how many years? For 7 years. And he knew what that meant. You see, at that time, when you wanted to marry someone, you paid the father of the bride a price. And that price was usually about 2 years' worth of wages. So you see that Jacob, right out of the box, is absolutely in love. He's absolutely lovesick. And he is a horrible bargainer because he immediately offers 3 to 4 times the price of normal price. Right? Normally it's 2 years, and he says, I'll give you 7 years. I want this wife so bad. But not only that, Jacob was the son of a man of tremendous wealth. He wasn't used to hard work. Servants did the hard work for him back home, and now Jacob was willing to do hard work. He was willing to be a servant for this girl. And so Laban knew that he had him. Right? He knew this man was vulnerable. He knew that he could take advantage of this man because he was so in love with Rachel. And so he immediately comes up with this plan, realizing he could get more out of this deal. And so when Jacob asked for 7 years, Laban's response never says, hey, 7 years, yeah, it's a deal. No, Jacob wants it to be a yes. He hears a yes, but it's not a yes. Laban is just saying, yeah, okay, if you want to marry Rachel, I think that's a good idea, but I'm not going to make a deal with you. And so 7 years pass, and Jacob says, 7 years, fulfill my deal, give me my wife. And as customary, there's this great feast, there's this big party. In the middle of the feast, the bride is brought heavily veiled to the groom. So Leah was given to him, and he took her into the tent. And Jacob was probably drunk, as was also the custom, and in that dark tent, Jacob lay with her. And then the text tells us, but when morning came, there was Leah. In the morning, there was Leah. Jacob looked, and he discovered that he had married Leah, not Rachel. He had slept with Leah, not Rachel. He had consummated the marriage with Leah, not Rachel. So Jacob, at this point, is angry, rightfully so, and he goes to his uncle, he goes to Laban, and he says, what is this you've done to me? I've served you for Rachel. That was the deal. It was for Rachel. Why have you deceived me? We see that Laban replies that it's customary for the older girl to be married before the younger girl. And then it gets kind of weird because Jacob's response is sort of confusing here. As soon as Laban says that, Jacob basically says, oh, okay. Right? He's obviously angry at a situation. Right? The situation is absolutely ridiculous. Why doesn't Jacob fight back? Why doesn't he lash out with him? Why doesn't he debate him? Why doesn't he argue with him? Why doesn't he hit him? Well, when Jacob said, why have you deceived me? The word deceived here is translated the same Hebrew word that was used to describe what Jacob did to his father, Isaac. So what are we seeing here? Right, what goes around comes around, sowing and reaping. This takes us back to what Jacob did to his father when Jacob deceived Isaac. Remember what he did? He dressed up in fur to get Isaac to think he was Esau. So at this moment, it must have occurred to Jacob that Laban had not only done to him what he had done to his father. In the dark, Jacob thought he was touching Rachel, as his father, in the darkness of his blindness, thought he was touching Esau. Jacob exchanged the younger for the older. Laban exchanged the older for the younger. And this isn't in the Bible, but could you imagine the conversation that Jacob and Leah have the next morning? Jacob wakes up, he sees that it's Leah, and he says to her, hey, Leah, I called out Rachel. I called out Rachel in the dark, and you answered. Why did you do that to me? And I imagine Leah probably looks at him. She says, well, Jacob, your father called out Esau in the dark. Why did you answer him? And so anger dies on his lips. Suddenly, the evil he has done has come to Jacob, and he sees what it's like to be manipulated and deceived, and so he picks up and he works another 7 years. We leave Jacob in these verses in devastation, and then we also see in these verses what it's done to Leah. Now, who is Leah? We're not told much, but we are told that Leah is the older daughter, and the only detail we've given about her is that she has weak eyes. What does it mean to have weak eyes? Nobody quite knows. Some have assumed maybe it means that she has bad eyesight. Some think that maybe it means that she was cross-eyed. It could mean something unsightly. It could mean that she was bad on the eyes. Nevertheless, here's the point. Leah was unattractive. She had to live her entire life in the shadow of her sister, who was absolutely stunning. And she had weak eyes. And as a result of that, Laban knew that no one was going to marry her. Nobody was going to offer any money for her. And he was wondering probably at this stage in her life how he was going to get her married, how he was going to get rid of her, how he was going to unload her. And then he sees with Jacob his chance. He saw an opening and he decides to take it. And now that girl that Laban, her father, did not want, has been given to Jacob, a husband who did not want her. She's quite literally the girl that nobody wants. And we see in these verses that Leah has a void, an emptiness in her heart, every bit as big as the void, as the emptiness in Jacob's heart. And now, she begins to do to Jacob what Jacob had done to Rachel. Leah sets her heart on Jacob. She wants him. She thinks he can bring her fulfillment. And so she goes to him, and she sets her heart on him. We're told in these verses that Leah has 3 kids. And these verses are some of the saddest maybe that are in the Bible, because she uses Hebrew words here that express her longing for Jacob. First, we see that Leah gives birth to her first child, a boy, and she names him Reuben. Reuben in Hebrew means to see. And she thinks, now maybe my husband will see me. Maybe I won't be invisible anymore. And she says to God, hey, you've looked upon my affliction, you've given me a son, now maybe my husband will love me. But he doesn't. And she has a second son, and she named him Simeon. And the meaning of his name has to do with hearing. And she thinks, now maybe, now that I've had a second son, my husband will finally listen to me. Maybe he will hear me. Maybe I won't be invisible to him anymore. But he didn't. And she has a third son, and she names her third son Levi, which means to be attached. And she's thinking, maybe, finally, my husband's heart will be attached to me. And so she looks to this child, she looks to Levi for the hopes that maybe now her husband will finally love her. Maybe now her husband will finally be attached to her. What was she doing? She was trying to get her fulfillment through family. Leah still lived in the hope that her husband Jacob would love her and become attached to her through the birth of these sons. She had set her heart, all of her hopes, all of her dreams on her husband. Just like Jacob with Rachel, she thought, if I have his love, if he loves me, then I will have meaning. Then I will have purpose. Then that emptiness in my heart will be filled. She thought if I have babies, if I have sons, then finally my lousy life will be fixed. Instead, she was going down into grief, and the text says, it's kind of like a summary statement, that Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. Sad, isn't it? Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. Here's Leah trying everything to get her husband's attention, and she can't get it. That meant she was condemned every single day. Every single day she was condemned to see the man she most longed for in the arms of those whose shadow that she had lived in her entire life. Every single day was like another knife in her heart. And so in these verses we see Jacob. There's Jacob, and he says, if I can just get Rachel, then everything will be okay. And then we see Leah, and Leah says, if I can just get Jacob, then everything will be okay. What does this show us? Second point this morning, filling our empty hearts with worldly things will leave us disappointed. Filling our hearts with empty things will leave us disappointed. You see, as I said earlier, we all have this emptiness in our heart, and we're all searching to fill that emptiness in our heart. And if we fill that emptiness with worldly things, with things on this earth, with earthly things, it's going to leave us disappointed. See, when you get married, no matter how great you think that marriage is going to be, when you get a career, no matter how great you think that career is going to be, when you go off to college, no matter how much you think it's going to be awesome, when you finally win that championship, no matter how awesome you think it is, in the morning, it's always Leah. You think you're going to bed with Rachel, and in the morning, it's always Leah. Nobody has said that better than C.S. Lewis said it in Mere Christianity, and I really like this thinker. I know if you were here a couple weeks ago, you're like, he quoted C.S. Lewis last time too, but he's just a smart guy, and he says it so much better than I can. And this is what he says about this entire subject. I'll read with me on the screen. It says this: most people, if they have really learned to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want, and want badly, something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never quite keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or we first think of some foreign country, or first take up some subject that excites us, are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. I am not now speaking of what would be ordinarily called unsuccessful marriages or holidays or careers. I am speaking of the best possible ones. There was something we have grasped at in the first moment of longing, which just fades away in reality, and I think everyone knows what I mean. The spouse may be a good spouse, and the hotels and the scenery may have been excellent, and the chemistry may be a very interesting job, but something has invaded us. You see what he's saying? He's saying we all have this longing to fulfill our hearts, and we all see it in this world, and we chase after it in this world, and it could be a really good thing, right? It could be the best possible thing, but it still feels like something has evaded us. What he's trying to say, he's saying you've got to understand that in the morning, it's always Leah. It will always disappoint us. It will always make you feel like there needs to be something more. Why? Because if you lose those pounds, or if you stop that habit, or if you go into a relationship, or if you get married, if you get that job, if you play a sport, and you say, finally, this is going to fix my lousy life, those things will never do what you think they will do. In the morning, it's going to leave you wanting more. In the morning, it's always Leah, because everything in this world would disappoint you. All the worldly things into which we put our hopes and our dreams and our purpose in will leave us disappointed. I'm reminded, did y'all know that the Braves won the World Series this year? This fun thing to say. It's really cool to say. All my life, I've been a Braves fan. I didn't really remember the first championship. I was too young. And so I remember just watching games with my dad growing up, even now, just turning on the TV almost every night in the summer, or listening to it on the app, or talking about it in this baseball group chat that I have. It's always great, right, to think about the Braves. And never in my life did I think I'd see them win it all. And this year, November 2nd, they finally won it all. And I was excited. I was happy. I was jumping around. I was so thrilled that they won. And the next morning, I woke up and I thought, yeah, I'm happy, and this is really cool. Was that all? All my life I was waiting for that, and that was the feeling I got. It was a good feeling, but there's still an emptiness there. It didn't completely satisfy my heart. I was left wanting more, and the things of this world, in the same way, I know that's a dumb example, will always leave you wanting more. And when you finally find that out, you can blame the things, and you can drop them and go try new ones, better ones. That's why the divorce rates are so high. That's why people are always chasing for more money or changing careers, because they think, I've achieved it all and I still don't have that fulfillment. Or you can do as C.S. Lewis says, you can change the entire focus of your life, because he concludes this statement with this: if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this life can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Why doesn't anything fulfill us on this earth? Why will it always leave us disappointed? Because you weren't made for this place. You're made for another place. Which brings us to the concluding verse 35. And this is what it says: and Leah conceived again and bore a son, and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah. Leah is the first person in the story to get it. She begins to see what you're supposed to do. Look first at what God does in her. As we have said, every time she has a child, she puts all of her hopes and all of her dreams in that child for her husband loving her. She has made an idol out of her husband. Yet here she doesn't talk about God in some general way or invoke the name of Elohim. She uses the name of God, Yahweh. In verse 32, it says it. She says she bore a son, Reuben, and because the Lord Yahweh has looked upon her affliction. So the question then is, how does she know about Yahweh? You see, Elohim was a generic word for God back then. Right? Everybody knew of Elohim. It's kind of like the difference of seeing me and saying, well, there's a man and walking by, or seeing me and saying, well, there's John, and he's a youth pastor, and he blah, 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 right? Like, that's the difference between Elohim and Yahweh, and she knew Yahweh. Everyone understood God in some sense, but Yahweh was different. Yahweh was the God who came down, who served, who entered into a personal covenantal relationship, who intervened to save. Certainly they didn't understand everything he was going to do, but Abraham and Isaac knew something about it, and Jacob would have known something about it as well. So it's interesting to see that Leah must have learned about Yahweh from Jacob. And even though she's in the grip of her idolatry, somehow she's still trying, she's still calling out, she's still reaching out to the God of grace. She has grasped the concept, but she doesn't fully understand it. You might say she has a disconnected theology because she's calling him Lord, yet she's treating him like a genie in a bottle, just getting the wishes she wants. Do you track with me? Do you follow me? She's saying, God, help me save myself through having kids. God, help me save myself through my husband's love. And so she's using God, yet she doesn't call him Elohim. She calls him Yahweh. She's beginning to get it. And what's intriguing is that at the very end, something happens. For the first time, she gives birth, and she says, not now maybe my husband will see me, not maybe my husband will hear me, not maybe my husband will attach to me. No, she says, for the fourth time, when she gives birth to Judah, this time. She says, this time. Isn't that defiance? It's totally different from the previous 3 times. No mention of her husband, no mention of the child. There's some kind of breakthrough. She says, this time I will praise the Lord. At that point, she has finally taken her heart's deepest hopes of the old way off of her husband, off of her children, and she has put them on the Lord. Here's what I believe is going on. Jacob and Laban had stolen Leah's life. But when she finally stopped giving her heart to a good thing that she turned into an ultimate thing and gave it to the Lord, she got her life back. So the second question this morning that I want to ask you to think about is this, is what good thing in your life have you turned into an ultimate thing? What good thing in your life are you treating as an ultimate thing? You see, most of the things I listed this morning aren't evil. They aren't sinful. They aren't bad things. Marriage, love, jobs, talent, sports, they're all good gifts from God. But they only become bad when we try to find ultimate satisfaction and ultimate fulfillment in them. So the third and final point that I want you to see this morning is this, is that only God can fulfill our deepest longings. Only God can fulfill our deepest longings. So what do you need to stop giving your heart to if you're going to be like Leah and get your life back? I'm absolutely certain that everybody in this room has something. Do you know what it is? In the story, something happened to Leah. God did something in her. There was a breakthrough. She began to understand what you're supposed to do with your desire for fulfillment. Not search for it in the things of this world, but go to God. And she turned her heart toward the only real beauty, the only real lover who could satisfy those deepest needs. Are you? Or are you searching to find that in the world? We can't just look at what God did in her. We also have to see what God does for her. And there was something special about this last child. I believe that she sensed that God did something for her, and he had. The writer of Genesis knew what God had done, because this child is Judah. And who is Judah? Genesis chapter 49 tells us that it's through Judah that Shiloh will come, and it is through Shiloh that the king will come. What does that mean? It means that this is the line. Starting with Leah, this is the messianic line. And this is why this story is the perfect story for Christmas weekend. Because God has come through the girl that nobody wanted, through the unloved, and made her the mother of Jesus. Not beautiful Rachel, but the ugly one, the unwanted one, the unloved one. And why did God do that? Does he just like the underdog? No, he did it because of who he is and because of his work. It says that when the Lord saw Leah was not loved, he loved her. And God is saying, I am the real bridegroom. I am the husband of the husbandless. I am the father of the fatherless. What does that mean? It means that he's attracted to the people that the world is not attracted to. He loves the unwanted. He loves the unattracted. He loves the weak, the ones that the world does not want to be like. God says, if nobody else is going to love and want to be the spouse of Leah, I will be your spouse. And we need to see that God is our ultimate spouse as well. God says you must see him as what he is, the great bridegroom, the spouse for the spouseless. He is not just a king and we are his subjects. He is not just a shepherd and we are his sheep. No, he is the husband and we are his lovers. He loves us. He is captivated with us, even those of us whom no one is captivated with, especially those of us whom no one is captivated with. Do you feel like Leah? Unloved, alone, unworthy, forgotten, unwanted? God has come for you. And that's who he is, but that's not all. The second reason why he goes after Leah and not Rachel, why he makes the girl nobody wanted to be the mother of Jesus, the bearer of the messianic line, the bearer of salvation to the world, is not just because he likes the underdog, it's because that is the gospel. When God came to earth in Jesus Christ, he was the son of Leah. So this Christmas weekend, see that he became the man that nobody wanted. He was born in a manger. His parents were not celebrities. His birth was not extravagant. He had no beauty that we should desire him. He came into his own rejected him. And at the end, nobody wanted him. Everybody abandoned him. Even his Father in heaven didn't want him. Jesus cried out on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why did he become Leah's son? Why did he become the man nobody wanted? For you and for me. Here's the gospel. God did not save us in spite of the weakness that he experienced as a human, but through it. You don't actually get that salvation in your life through strength. It's only for those who admit that they are weak. And if you cannot admit that you are a hopeless, moral failure and a sinner, and that you are absolutely lost and you have no hope apart from the grace of God, then you are not weak enough for Leah and her son and the great salvation that God has brought into the world. God chose Leah because he is saying, this is how salvation works. This is the upside down way that my people will live, at least in this world, when they receive my salvation. Because now the way up is down. The way to become rich is to give your money away. The way to power is to serve God. When he came to earth as the son of Leah, God made Leah, the girl nobody wanted, into the mother of Jesus. Why? Because as 1 Corinthians 1 says, because he chooses the foolish things to shame the wise. He chooses the weak things to shame the strong. He chooses even the things that are not to bring to nothing the things that are, so that no one will boast in his presence. The girl that nobody wanted gives us the gift that everybody needs. So my question for you this morning is have you received this gift? Have you admitted your weakness and come to Christ in salvation? Do you see him as the ultimate thing that your life needs? The second question is maybe you have. Maybe you've been a Christian for 52 years. I don't know. But the question is, whether you're 7 or 77, are you running after the things of this world to search for your fulfillment? Or do you find that all in Jesus? What things in your life are you searching for satisfaction? What is robbing you of your true life? Let's pray. Lord God, thank you for this story. Maybe a weird story to share on Christmas weekend, but it's the perfect story because it shows us that you indeed bring salvation to the world through the most unlikely people. God, I thank you that you came. God, I thank you that you saved us, and I thank you that you show us that this world has nothing that we need, that you are everything that we need. Lord, be with us now as we sing this song. God, I pray that we can truly see that you are better than everything, that you are better than life. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Hey, let's stand and worship.